Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Create and Consume, a podcast about what we make, watch, and buy in the era of digital content. I'm your host, Austen Tosone. Life can throw curveballs at us, and it's not always easy to be optimistic 100% of the time. And also, sometimes you can find yourself having just okay days, and you wish there were an easy way to take an okay day into a good day. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's been kind of a tough week for me personally. And I know as we head into the holidays, people are dealing with a lot of emotions, and it's not always the easiest time for people. It got me thinking about a concept I first heard about over the summer called a dopamine menu. And this is something that has been on my mind for a while, and I've seen lots of other podcasters and TikTokers discuss on their own channels. So today I thought I would create my dopamine menu. In today's episode, I'll tell you more about what a dopamine menu is and why it can be helpful, and I'll share my dopamine menu with you as well, which you can use as inspiration or a blueprint to create your own so that you can always turn to it if you're having an okay day that you want to make a good day, or if you're going through a tough time. So I'm just sending virtual hugs out to everyone, and I hope you all enjoy this episode. Before we get into today's main topic, let's do a little create and consume. This week, I have been creating my brand new blog, and this has actually been a few weeks in the making at this point. It is something that I am super proud of. So if you don't follow me on Instagram or you haven't seen my new announcement for my blog, Keep Calm and Chiffon, I recently relaunched the website, and this is kind of a two-part relaunch. So the first part of that was actually something in the back end that you don't ever have to worry about or deal with, but that me and a developer that I hired were working on, which was actually moving my blog from Squarespace over to self-hosted WordPress. Basically, there are several reasons why I switched over. If you want to read about all of them, you can check out my blog relaunch announcement post, which I'll link in the show notes, or you can actually watch the process of me relaunching my blog in my latest YouTube video, which I will also link in the show notes. But long story short, Squarespace just wasn't the right home for my blog anymore, so I moved it over to WordPress. And then the second part of this relaunch is actually a brand new blog design. I can't take full credit for the design. I did purchase a theme from a graphic designer. However, I did technically bring the theme to life, if you want to call it that, where I was able to basically take this initial template, customize it for my own website, and create some great new pages like my partnerships page and the shopping page of my blog that didn't necessarily transfer over properly from Squarespace, so I kind of just chose to start from scratch and entirely redesign. Nothing is changing in regards to the content on my blog, but I just think that this new host and layout is going to be a lot more user-friendly and better for the reader. So if you have a few minutes to go check it out, I would really appreciate it, and I would love to hear what you think. And then in terms of what I'm consuming this week, as many of you know, I started this podcast because I myself am an avid podcast listener. So much so to the point where I kind of inhale my episodes maybe faster than originally intended, because I love listening to podcasts while I'm walking or cleaning or doing any number of things, honestly. And sometimes I get really caught up on my usual rotation of podcasts very quickly. And most of the podcasts I listen to release episodes between Tuesday and Friday. So that leaves, Saturday, Sunday, Monday with typically no new podcast content for me. So one thing that I did last year was start a new podcast that I have now caught up to and is now back in my weekly podcast rotation. And I decided to do that again. I found a podcast called The Good Place, the podcast, which is a podcast about one of my all-time favorite television shows, hosted by one of the actors, Mark Evan Jackson, who plays Sean, if you've watched the show. And on each episode, they typically pair either an actor and a writer, or a writer and a set designer, or someone from the costume department to have conversations basically about each episode, but also just about larger themes of the show. And if you are someone who's interested in the making of a television show, it is really, really fascinating and well done. I have just been enjoying listening to that podcast. Now, I think it only lasted for however many episodes there were of the show. So I think I probably will have about 50 episodes to listen to, which is just kind of a nice way to fill a gap when I'm in need of new content, even though it's not technically new. It's from 2018. But that is the beauty of podcasts and searchable long form content, which, if you followed me on the influencer front for a while, you know I think is really, really important and something that, again, here I am sitting in 2024 and I'm listening to a podcast from 6 years ago. And you guys can let me know what you're creating and consuming as well by leaving comments on the Instagram or TikTok accounts for the podcast, which are always linked in the show notes, or leaving a comment on the YouTube video if that's where you're watching this podcast. I always love hearing from you, and I'm always open to suggestions for things that I can be creating and things that I can be consuming. Let's get into today's topic of conversation, which is the dopamine menu. And before I get into the concept of a dopamine menu, I just wanted to share some quick definitions that I found of dopamine and how it can impact us. So, according to the Cleveland Clinic, dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter and hormone. It plays a role in many important body functions, including movement, memory, and pleasurable, reward, and motivation. Basically, dopamine acts on various areas of our brains to give us feelings of pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. And according to my research, this concept of a dopamine menu seems to have originated from a creator, Jessica McCabe, who has a YouTube channel called How to ADHD. In a sense, this dopamine menu is a curated list of these pleasurable, healthy habits and activities that naturally elevate dopamine levels, which can boost our happiness, focus, and motivation. I actually love this concept, and to me, this is almost a branch of another trend that I think has come about a lot in recent years, kind of from social media, which is the concept of romanticizing your life. And I think a lot of us turned to this concept right after the pandemic as we were kind of, either figuring out what our new normal looked like or still kind of prioritizing staying at home rather than going out and socializing. And the idea of romanticizing your life comes back to the thought that even the little simplest things can be big moments if that's how you view and perceive them. I think that idea of treating yourself as the main character in your own life is something that, yes, might be somewhat silly and people could write off as a social media trend, but actually really puts things in perspective and I think makes people realize that you are in control of your own life. And if things aren't going the way that you thought they would, or you're really unhappy with one particular area of your life, that you do actually have the power to make a change and to make your own decisions to make your life as close to your ideal dream life as you can get it. And if that starts with something as simple as like really savoring that first sip of coffee in the morning, then everyone can just chill out, right? Like everyone can just mind their own business. If that's really what makes someone happy and gives them even that little bit of extra happiness or whatever throughout the day, I think that that is totally worth it and reasonable. So I just wanted to say that. Obviously, this is not a substitute for, any problems that need to be addressed by a therapist or a medical professional, but this is really just something to kind of quote unquote, for lack of a better term, help you look on the bright side and really make the everyday feel special. And I mean, now I'm going to go off on a whole other tangent, probably. This could all be a whole different podcast episode about, the idea that happiness is not like a destination that you get to someday when you have certain boxes checked, and that you need to find happiness, throughout the everyday in your own life. Maybe I'll do a philosophical my philosophies episode later on, maybe after I finish The Good Place or The Good Place, the podcast. But all of that to say that I love this idea because I think that having it in a menu form really gives you things that you can turn to easily. It's almost like this pre-written list that you can order from and take what you need from. So the way that I structured my dopamine menu was just taken from examples that I have seen on TikTok and have heard on other podcasts. So they come in the following forms. So number 1 is appetizers. Number 2 is entrees. Number 3 is sides. Number 4 is desserts. And number 5 is specials. So I'll explain in more detail what each of these are as I go. But just even knowing that it corresponds to what an actual menu would look like can probably give you a sense of where this is headed and what each of these activities requires in terms of effort or time or preparation. So let's kick it off by talking about appetizers, which I have chosen to define here as basically a really quick dopamine hit that is low effort. For me, this is ideally something I can do in 5 minutes or less to feel better. And again, my list is meant to just be kind of a jumping off point, but feel free to, copy and paste any of these ideas for yourself or put your own spin on what these menu items could look like. My first appetizer is something that I've already alluded to, which for me is either making a matcha or a cup of coffee. And what I love about this is not something I have to specifically go set aside time to do. It's just something that I do every day because I'm only human and I am maybe just mildly addicted to caffeine. But even when I am making my coffee in the morning, just taking my time, walking to the kitchen, just flicking the lights on to kind of signify, like, okay, it's morning, we're getting going for the day, opening the cabinet, and even just choosing a mug that I love, which I don't really have any mugs that I don't love, but just kind of even setting the vibe for the day. It sounds silly, but even having the right mug in my hand can make me happy and make such a difference. Today's mug of choice was my Hoboken mug, which my mom got me when she and my dad came for lunch a few weeks ago. We popped into a little store here and she bought this mug because I said I liked it, which was very nice of her. And number one, that mug reminds me of the beautiful fall day that I got lunch with my parents, which is nice. But also, it is a really big, almost camping like mug. It's kind of like a thick but low cylinder, and it has this really satisfying handle to grip. And I know I'm making such a big deal out of a mug, but like, it really is just a mug that like sets the vibe or sets the tone for the rest of the day. Even though 9 times out of 10, I'm starting my day just with black coffee, it's not even like something super fancy. Having that mug and just coming down and sitting with it and really savoring and enjoying that first sip of coffee can set the tone for my whole day. In addition, if I need a second caffeinated beverage later in the morning or sometimes in the late afternoon, especially if I find I'm kind of slogging through the day or I've kind of hit that wall, getting up and making myself an iced matcha feels like such a special treat. And again, it takes me less than 5 minutes to do. It's super easy. All I do is take one of my packets of matcha. Right now, I have these pre packed servings of matcha, but sometimes I'll get a jar where I can scoop out like a teaspoon of matcha powder. I pour it into a cup with a quarter cup of warm water. I mix it with my milk frother. Then I add ice. I pour almond milk over top. And it's literally as if I went to a coffee shop and bought myself that drink, except I made it at home. On a similar note to that, another thing that I absolutely love doing is lighting a candle while working. And let me tell you, as we head into the winter months where it starts to get dark so early, this really is one of the things that keeps me at my desk until the end of the day. And, sometimes I do migrate to the couch or whatever, depending on what I'm working on. But I actually feel like this just creates almost like a cozy work environment. And when I think back to when I worked full time at a magazine and had to do most of my writing at my desktop desk, sitting upright in a cute outfit, I always thought about the days that I could either work from a coffee shop or like work from my own apartment and how much cozier and how much more genuine writery it would feel to me to just like have my own desk and my own space and be able to take my time when I'm writing or doing something. So, lighting a candle while working is such a great way to do that. I mean, if you need candle suggestions, I obviously have no shortage of those. I think that there are great candles that you can purchase from like a Target or a Home Goods that are going to be very inexpensive that can definitely spark that dopamine, especially depending on the scents. I also like to light seasonal candles. So right now I've got toasted pumpkin next to me. And I also have one called Martini Girl, which I feel like is an inherently winter candle for some reason. I especially like to lean into this over like Christmas and the holidays, but even in the spring and summer, I feel like I lean into more citrusy and fresh smelling candles to go along with the seasons. And again, lighting a candle while I'm working takes 2 seconds, and all I really have to do is remember to blow it out in a few hours or whenever I'm leaving my desk. It's extremely low effort, but for some reason, it just sets the tone and makes me feel so much more like, I don't know. It's almost like I'm just being hugged, if you can understand what I mean by that. Another appetizer is to send a text to a friend telling them that you appreciate them. And I remember the last time I did this, a lot of the responses were like, what's wrong? And like, are you dying? Or all of these, like, jumping to conclusions that maybe I'd been hacked or something had happened. And it's not because I don't tell my friends that I love them, but it's just that normally we don't take the time and set it aside to text someone out of the blue and just tell them how much we appreciate them. And you never know, like, when that text is going to find your friend when they were having sort of a down day, or when everything was going wrong, or when they were stressed at work, and like how much it means to them to know that you took like 2 seconds out of your day to think about them and send that text. And I think the reason that is a dopamine hit for me is because it's a dopamine hit for them. And I think that goes along with obviously the general idea of just paying it forward, being a good person, letting people know that you care about them. And I just think that that is something we could all do more of. And you could even set a timer. If you set a timer for 5 minutes, I mean, I don't know how fast of a texter you are, but I assume it's pretty quick. If you're listening to this podcast, you are probably already pretty technologically savvy. Even if you set a timer for 5 minutes, I feel like you could fire off like maybe a dozen texts in that time that they don't have to be that long. It could just be like, I just am so appreciative to have a great friend like you. And I feel like they're not hard to customize either. Another appetizer on my list is to fill my water tumbler to the brim with water, but also it's probably like 80 to 90% ice. So sometimes I have my Stanley, sometimes I have this Simple Modern tumbler. If you're watching on YouTube, I actually have to say this one is less leaky than the Stanley. So shout out to Simple Modern for whatever they did to make this not spill as much. But knowing that like 30 ounces or more of ice water is available within less than 1 yard of my person is something that does bring me a lot of joy. And I don't know how to explain it other than it just makes me feel happy. And obviously, staying hydrated is something that I think I do a very good job of. I definitely drink more than the recommended amount of water that you should be drinking in a day. And when my Stanley is like filled to the brim, and then I park down at my desk or on the couch, or we're getting in the car for a long road trip, like it just makes me feel good to know that that's there with me. Because taking a sip of ice cold water, it's one of those things that just makes you remember, like, oh my God, I'm alive. Like, this is freezing and I feel things and I'm a person. And here I am, just one tiny speck on this flying marble throughout the sky. And it really just does put things in perspective. I don't know how else to explain it. Oh, and then the last thing on my appetizers list is my skincare routine. And, this can maybe vary a little bit if I want to throw a mask in or something like that. But generally speaking, I don't want my skincare routine to take more than 5 minutes. And because I have it under that time limit, that makes it really easy to be a non-negotiable for me in my day. In the mornings, I always either wash my face in the shower if I did a workout, or use one of my LMS resurfacing pads to kind of just get myself to a clean slate with my face. And then from there, I usually do an eye cream, a vitamin C serum, and sunscreen. That is kind of like my non-negotiable morning skincare routine. And then in the evenings, it's usually a similar thing. I will remove my makeup / wash my face. I will use an eye cream. I will use a serum of some kind. In the mornings, I do vitamin C for brightening. In the evenings, I do either something really hydrating like a hyaluronic acid or niacinamide serum, or I will use a retinol. And I only use retinol like 2 to 3 times a week. And then I always lock it in with a moisturizer to finish up. Just knowing that I'm taking time to hydrate my skin and repair my moisture barrier and protect my skin from pollutants and all of that stuff is something that, again, makes me feel like I'm taking care of myself, and in that sense is definitely a dopamine hit. Let's move on to the entrees section. So, on my dopamine menu, the entrees are the things that are longer activities that need to be like scheduled or planned out to really see through. You can't necessarily do them in a quick 5 minutes in between work calls, but things that you really enjoy and that you can reach for ideally like weekly or a couple times a month. So for me, one of those is reading in the morning. And I finally have gotten back into a good rhythm with reading. And if you guys listen to one of my earlier episodes from this year called In My Reading Era, I talked about how to make time for reading and how to find books that appeal to you and speak to you and not feel like, unnecessary homework that you don't want to do. And reading in the morning has truly become just such an amazing way to start my day. So, right now, and you might laugh at this, but like I do have it in my calendar. So, right now, Tuesdays and Thursday mornings are reading mornings. So, when I wake up, I grab my book and I try to read for at least 30 minutes, but ideally, maybe even a little more than that. It really just depends on what time I wake up and how busy I'm going to be that day. But getting in this rhythm of reading has just given me something to do other than scrolling on my phone. And, none of these things on this dopamine menu, by the way, spoiler alert, are scrolling TikTok or scrolling Instagram, because in reality, those things don't necessarily make me feel that good, even though I do them. So, in fact, when I do feel the urge to scroll on social media, I should turn to the dopamine menu and pick literally anything else. I just like that it gives my brain a way to wake up that doesn't involve a screen. So, reading in the morning has become something that, like I said, I like to do twice a week, as far as when I definitely make time to do it. And then I will also squeeze in maybe on weeknights or the weekend whenever I have some extra time too. Next up on the entree menu is a Saturday in the neighborhood with Andrew. So we moved to Hoboken in March 2021. We've been here for 3.5 years now, and I just absolutely love living here. Like, there's no other way to say it. And one of my favorite ways to spend ideally a Saturday, but maybe like a Friday night or a Sunday too, depending, is honestly just hanging out here with Andrew. And a couple of different things could happen throughout the course of a day like this. So, even just to start out in the morning, usually we'll do our own separate workouts. For me, that's probably the Peloton. For Andrew, that's likely a run. And we'll just take that time to take care of ourselves, check our workouts off the list early, and then meet back up afterwards. And in an ideal world, we would have bagels after our workout. So I probably would have walked to O Bagel to pick up some breakfast sandwiches. And then in the afternoon/evening, basically any combination of the things I'm about to mention would still qualify this as like just a perfect day spent in the neighborhood with Andrew, who I love. He's my husband if you're new here. When it's warmer out, we like to take our picnic blankets and a cooler out to the waterfront. Sometimes we'll pick up sandwiches on our way, or sometimes we'll bring along like snacks or whatever. And we might bring our books and read for a little while, or we might bring games, or we might meet up with other people. We might even take an hour and deep clean the apartment. And that just brings me dopamine because I think better in a clear space. And then maybe we'll spontaneously go out to dinner or try a new bar that we haven't been to before. Honestly, just any combination of exploring the neighborhood and hanging out with Andrew is fun, basically, no matter what we do. So, yeah, a Saturday at home where we basically have no plans, maybe just a dinner reservation, is ideal. Another one for me is an extra long walk around Hoboken. And this can be by myself, or if I can get Andrew to come along with me, I will. But, he prefers to do like his long runs and stuff. So by the time he comes back from those, he's not necessarily looking to go on a long walk, an equally long walk. But for me, I will either grab, like my Stanley, or maybe plan to pick up a coffee from a local cafe somewhere. I will have fully charged AirPods. I will have my sunglasses and my baseball hat, and whatever sweatshirt or jacket I have to throw on depending on what the temperature is. And I could go on a walk and listen to a podcast for probably up to like a full hour. And I love planning these long walks because I try to work out with my Peloton 3 times a week. On Monday, Wednesday, and then Saturday, I do a longer ride. But sometimes I just like to mix in a longer walk to have my movement, especially on days when I'm not doing a planned workout like that. Oh, another one on my entrees is spending a Sunday afternoon just watching football. We are currently in football season, and I just really enjoy all of the different games. I like seeing how different teams are looking. I like watching kind of the standout players do their thing. And especially during a season like I can't believe I'm saying this, but the 2-8 season that the New York Giants are having, which is just so abysmal. It makes me feel better when I watch other people do well because it makes me remember that other people can score touchdowns and sack quarterbacks and do all the things that the Giants can't seem to do. But that's a problem for literally someone who's not me. But anyway, I love the concept of like a Sunday afternoon watching football at home. I usually try to make a fun snack if I can. Love the buffalo chicken dip from Trader Joe's. I bought the caramel onion dip. We haven't tried that one yet, but it's like on deck. Sometimes I have frozen snacks and other things too, but I don't know. There's just something about laying low and again, sitting there with my Stanley filled to the brim with ice and water and just taking it easy and unplugging. And then the last thing on my entrees list is a perfect me day in the city. And this could be, I could be accompanied by Andrew or a friend, or I could be doing it all by myself. Whatever combination is available to me, I'll go with. But basically, just a day in the city spent doing some of my all time favorite things. And if you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, I actually did film a perfect day in the city. I chose to focus on just one neighborhood to kind of keep it concise, but I did like my perfect fall day on the Upper West Side. And in that video, I go to a local coffee shop and try their chai latte. Then I go to a bookstore. I go on a long walk through Central Park. I go to check out an exhibit at a museum, and then I end the day with a little bit of thrifting. Spending a whole day doing all of those things back to back to back is like the ultimate dopamine day. I feel like in an ideal world, I would do that probably like once a month or once every 6 weeks, just because I feel like it's not realistic to do it more often than that. But yeah, if you want to see the full visual of that, definitely go watch that latest YouTube video, and I will link it in the show notes. Next, I want to talk about sides, which is basically things to add on to activities you already do, usually to take a neutral and or boring activity and just spice it up a little bit, make it a tiny bit more fun. I think I can kind of do these in a bit more of like a rapid fire segment. So to start out, putting on an ambiance room while working. I especially like doing this in the fall, winter. I just put on an ambiance room on YouTube on my TV, which is right behind me if you're watching on YouTube. And I like to pick usually like a cozy coffee shop or something and have jazz music playing. That's what most ambiance rooms come with. You could probably put your own playlist if you wanted to get extra technical, but for some reason that is perfect because it just gives an additional kind of element of being the main character or setting the right vibe, and it's not distracting because it's just like quiet instrumental jazz music. That's an easy way to just make my workday feel a little bit cozier. Okay, next side is watching TV while on the Peloton. And don't get me wrong, I love a good class from a Peloton instructor, but I will say that being able to watch like Gilmore Girls on the Peloton or The Good Place, which I'm now rewatching, it just makes the time fly by so much quicker. And I'm pretty good and in a rhythm at this point with my workouts. So it's not necessarily like my sole motivator for working out. But once I actually get on the bike and I'm like, oh, just an episode of The Good Place, or oh, just an episode of Gilmore Girls, it makes the time just go so much faster. And obviously, it's enjoyable. Another side is listening to a podcast while cleaning the apartment. And I mean, if I have the right podcasts locked in, I could scrub this apartment from top to bottom, no problem. It is just so nice to be able to clean and feel like you're not alone. It's kind of like the perfect way, and maybe you guys feel this way about podcasts too, to feel like you're hanging out with people, but you don't personally have to like extend your social battery and actually participate in the conversation. You just get to be on the receiving end of it. And there's just something really comforting about that to me, to feel like I am spending time with friends or creators that I really like, and that I am just like making the time again kind of go by faster or making that activity more enjoyable. Another side, watching a comfort YouTuber while folding laundry. I am literally the worst. I will let my laundry sit out on that drying rack that you can probably see in the background on YouTube or in the dryer for days to avoid folding laundry. And one thing that always makes it go by faster is if I just put on whatever was on my watch later playlist on YouTube, prop up the screen and my laptop next to where I'm folding and just getting it done. I realize how much time I waste by trying to procrastinate and not fold the laundry and how silly and avoidant that is. And I realize how quickly it goes by when I'm just, again, kind of hanging out with someone who feels like a friend. Another one is calling your parents or friends or siblings or whoever while out on a walk. I sometimes start walking and just get the urge to pick up the phone. And that is one of my favorite times to connect with people, especially if you get to call a friend who you have been meaning to call and haven't connected with in a while. Again, for me, if I am doing a long walk around the neighborhood, like, yes, I can listen to a podcast or music while I'm doing that, but it's also such a nice time to catch up with people and just see what everyone's been up to. And again, let people know that you're thinking about them. And the last thing on my sides list was working from a coffee shop for a change of scenery. So, if you are a fully remote worker or you do have flexibility where you can work from home some days, I highly recommend picking a day where you don't have any meetings or phone calls and just going out to a coffee shop and working even for like an hour. Sometimes I think people think that you need to go to a coffee shop and plant yourself there from the time they open till the time they close. Sometimes some of my best, most productive work is when I just leave the house for an hour, and I will also intentionally usually not bring my laptop charger. So when the computer dies, like that's it. I need to be done with whatever task I set out to do. And it's crazy what change that brings to me. And obviously, I have always long wanted to have a career where I could work out of a coffee shop. And that is something that I so appreciate about like this job and this career that I've basically created for myself is that I have the flexibility to do that. You know, getting a cute drink, just planting yourself at a table. Sometimes I'll listen to the coffee shop music, or other times I will. This sounds stupid, but like if the music in the coffee shop isn't the vibe, I will just go to Spotify and find like coffee house music or like coffee house jazz or something instrumental that I can listen to, unless I'm like editing a video where I need to listen to me, unfortunately. But yeah, that's just one of the things that I think you can really do that is such a mood booster. And it doesn't mean you have to stop working. It really is just that change of scenery that can elevate your productivity and help you stay fresh and come up with new ideas. Let's move on to desserts, which are things that you love but only make sense to indulge in sometimes. So, one thing I wrote down was charcuterie board and wine night at home every once in a while instead of a full on dinner. And I usually only do this if I'm with Andrew in the apartment or if we are with my parents and we're visiting them for the weekend. Sometimes we just want to like make the charcuterie board our dinner, which I'm sure is not the healthiest thing to do, obviously, which is why it's on this desserts list as something that, you know, you're not going to do this once a week. You know, maybe this is like a once every couple of months type of situation. But there is just something that makes me feel like some kind of magical food artist when I put together a great charcuterie board. And even when I learn like one new skill related to charcuterie, like, oh, what if I slice the cheese into triangles instead of just squares? Or like, you know, the salami rows, or all of these little things that I feel like I have learned over the years and have just gotten better and better about assembling a cheese board that like has a total vibe to it. There's just something that makes that feel like really special and cute. And I mean, just splitting basically any bottle of wine, I am not picky whatsoever as long as it's not like rosé. I don't know. There's just something that feels kind of like when Andrew and I do it, it feels very like we're adults and we get to make our own rules. So we're just going to like decide we're having cheese and crackers for dinner. And then when I'm with my parents, it just feels like an extra special treat. Like I can't really explain it more than that. So again, obviously that's not something we're doing like every single week, but every once in a while, I absolutely love that. And then I guess I put this under desserts too. I didn't really have that many because I also didn't have much of a differentiator between desserts and specials, which is the last item that I'm going to get to. But I put reading at a bar. And I guess I technically have only done this once. And I vlogged it like a few months ago, but I really enjoyed this. I was on my way to meet some friends for dinner, and I just decided to head into the city early, stop at a bar, and have one glass of wine and read for a little bit before dinner. And I loved the whole vibe of this. Like, it is such an elite experience, and I want to do it more. And I feel like, if anything, I'd have better luck finding bars in Hoboken and Jersey City that are good spots to do this at, even more so than New York, just because New York is inherently going to be a little bit more crowded. But I really loved that. And again, that's like not something I do if, Andrew's around and we want to hang out together. That's more like he was away for the weekend and I was like, I've kind of never tried this before, so I want to do it and see how it goes. And I ended up liking it. I think the trick with that also is you have to go like not too early and also not too late. Like, you need to be done, I think, by 8 p.m. the latest. And the last section on this dopamine menu is specials. And these are things that you probably only do once in a while, but you really look forward to. So I guess for desserts, that's a little bit more indulgent, like what I was talking about with eating an entire charcuterie board for dinner. For specials, this is not necessarily indulgent, but it's something you still love, but takes more planning and something that you do more sporadically because it's special. It's in the name, okay? So one thing I wrote down was weekend getaway or day trip. Andrew and I have done a couple of day trip hikes over this past summer where we have done a hike and then we have stopped by at some kind of restaurant or brewery for lunch and been home by dinner. Sometimes just getting out of the city for one day can actually do you a world of good. And then for weekend getaways, these are things that I will either do with Andrew or sometimes with friends. So in a few weeks, I'm actually going with my friend Devin to a property in upstate New York that invited her. She is a journalist and she invited me to tag along with her. And then I also have an annual girls' trip to the Catskills that we usually do in the spring with Andrew's side of the family. So knowing that I get to do that like twice a year, so for this year, it will have been one time in March and one time in November, those little getaways are just so nice. It is such a nice time to reconnect with people and spend a lot of quality time together all in one sitting on one swoop versus kind of like, the rest of the year, you're kind of either making time to see each other just for a few hours one evening, or you're sending texts letting each other know that you're thinking about each other. So yeah, that's like the ultimate quality time, is to be able to do these little weekend getaways. And I absolutely love exploring different parts of upstate New York, especially, and the Catskills. Another special that I wrote down is going to a comedy show. And I actually would like to do this a little more than I usually do it. The last time we went to a comedy show was when we went to Comedy Cellar in July, when my brother and sister-in-law came and stayed with us for the night. I just really enjoy a comedy show, even if they're still working out jokes or even if they fall flat. Like, that's half of the fun too, is to leave and be like, what was up with that guy? Or, oh my God, that girl was so hysterical. There is actually a comedy show venue in Jersey City that is like much more low key and cheaper to go to compared to Comedy Cellar. So maybe I can get Andrew to go with me sometime soon. Okay, another special, I wrote down getting a facial. This is not something I feel like I need all the time, but before a big event or just when I feel like my skin is really struggling, I love getting a facial. And if you don't want to do anything too fancy and you want it to be quick and painless, I highly recommend Glow Bar. I have gone to them twice before and really enjoyed my experience. But if you want to go a little more luxury and you want to do something a little bit more involved, I also really like Joanna Vargas and Tracy Martin spas in the city. I have gotten facials at both of those before, and I just feel like so incredible and refreshed after. But it's something that if I start doing like too frequently, I feel like I wouldn't appreciate it as much. Plus, money. Everything is expensive. Another special for me is my 90-day dinner with my high school friends. So I think Alexa initially suggested this concept to us, but basically we try to make a conscious effort to meet all five of us, some of my best friends from high school who still live in the city and the surrounding area, to get together at least once a quarter, which is why we call it a 90-day dinner, to catch up. And honestly, that is the perfect amount of time, I think, in between to catch up with everybody. And obviously, there are usually one off hangs between people within the group before then. But in terms of scheduling for all five people, which I feel like five, once it gets above five and higher in a group, it gets harder to schedule like a full on plan together. But we are usually pretty diligent about this, about making a plan to see each other once a quarter. Every once in a while, someone's birthday or like some event that we're all going to might fill in and take the place of it. But I really treasure these friendships from high school that have been going for well over a decade now. And it means a lot to me that we still actively make the time to see each other, even though we're all busy with our own things. Another thing I wrote down is spending time with my nieces and nephews. That has been one of my favorite things about marrying into Andrew's family, is becoming an aunt. Obviously, I'm an only child, so I don't have any siblings who would have their own kids, and this is the way that I get to be an aunt too. So I absolutely love my nieces and nephews. I have two nephews and two nieces. Two of them live in Connecticut and the other two live in Rhode Island. So that's why it's under my specials list, because we try to see each other as often as we can, of course, but it's not necessarily, every single day. Sometimes, 2 or 3 months might go in between when we get to see each other. But when we do get to see them, we always make the most of the time. They're all very cute, very funny, and are all like developing their own personalities, which is honestly so crazy. So the youngest one is 8 months and the oldest one is 7 years old. And it's just really fun to like watch them grow up and get to be involved in their lives. My oldest nephew was born basically the week after Andrew became my boyfriend. So it's also kind of crazy to like see our relationship measured throughout his life and realize like, oh, when he was born, we like just started dating. So it's kind of crazy to have that like time comparison looped in too. Oh, and then the last thing I wrote for specials, and this is coming up, is taking the full week off between Christmas and New Year's. And I think this should be like a universal rule personally, but because I'm self employed, I really try to make a conscious effort to wrap everything I need to do by Christmas Eve, essentially, so that I can take that entire week off. And I don't go anywhere crazy. I don't do anything dramatic. I literally just am in whatever the smushiest clothes are in my wardrobe and my slippers, and I'm curled up on the couch reading, sitting by the Christmas tree with a seasonal candle lit, and I'm not doing anything. And that is like my favorite week of the year. I just think it is such the ultimate like unplug and reset moment. And I am absolutely obsessed with having that full week where I do absolutely nothing. Okay, so just to quickly recap, because I actually feel like that was a lot of information. My dopamine menu consists of appetizers like making a matcha or a cup of coffee, lighting a candle while working, and filling my Stanley to the brim with ice water. Entrees, which are longer activities I need to plan out but totally enjoy, like reading in the mornings, spending a Saturday in the neighborhood with Andrew, or going on a very, very long walk around the neighborhood. For sides, which are activities to add on to things I already do, I do things like watch TV while on the Peloton, listen to a podcast while cleaning the apartment, or working from a coffee shop for a change of scenery. For desserts, I do things that I love but only make sense to indulge in every once in a while, like a charcuterie board and wine night for dinner or reading at a bar. And for specials, those things that I only do every once in a while, but that I really look forward to, that includes weekend getaways, going to comedy shows, 90-day dinners with my friends, or taking the week off between Christmas and New Year's. I hope this inspires you to create your own dopamine menus. I would love to hear what's on yours too, so you can reach out and let me know. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And as a reminder, you can support Create and Consume for free by doing any of the following. You can leave Apple and Spotify ratings and reviews. You can like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you're watching this episode on YouTube. You can follow along at Create and Consume Pod on Instagram and TikTok. You could send this episode to a friend who might enjoy it. And as always, don't forget to check out createandconsumepodcast.com for episode recaps and more. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.